Carrie said, my name is Pat Canapiel. I teach at Visitation Valley Elementary School, close to the Cow Palace. Our neighborhood is very diverse and also very trauma impacted, and so there's a lot of social emotional needs that are definitely demanded on a daily basis. I was first introduced to restorative practices, as Carrie said, 3 years ago as a struggling new teacher, first-year teacher, and I was, to be honest with you, getting my butt kicked on a daily basis by my 5th grade students, and what my approach wasn't working, and then Carrie Berkowitz came in and gave a half-an-hour presentation to us about what restorative practices was, and I said, yeah, I could get into that, and I went to the training, and then I fully adopted the principles of restorative practices, and they've transformed my practice as a teacher, which in turn have kind of begun to transform our school as well. I took on the role of a site leader, and that started to change our school and kind of began this paradigm shift, which we talk about in restorative practices. And now, as a result, we have about 85% of our teachers holding weekly proactive community building circles. We're working on getting every certificated as well as classified staff trained in restorative practices at our school, and moving away from the question of why to address behavior into more of the restorative questions. In addition to that, we also have responsive circles when there is harm caused, as well as restorative conferences for more severe instances of harm. And then also after suspensions, because they do happen, we also have reentry circles and reentry conferences with families and students. And it looks pretty visual at our school. It's coming into a classroom and seeing a group of 30 kids sitting around a circle and passing a rain stick around and talking about how they feel, or like building community by playing games together and getting to know each other, opening up. And it also looks the way that teachers come down and on the kids' level and they ask them, like what happens, and work them through the process. As a site leader, I provided peer support because I'm a 5th grade teacher. That's really important. So modeling was really one of the big things. Also as like a problem solver, because a lot of teachers, and I'll address the challenges in a second, had a lot of challenges with restorative practices. But as a site leader, we are participating in goal setting, community building, and probably most importantly, I'm a cheerleader. You have to have somebody on your staff who is like preaching it and constantly going back to it, because otherwise it'll get lost underneath Common Core, RTI, PBIS, everything else. And so having that voice that's still there and keeping it pertinent is important. What have I seen on our school? Well, first off, it's a sense of community is being built, and you can see that in every single classroom. But it's also on the playground where actually it's most needed, and we see an increase in students' willingness to participate in conflict resolution, where it used to be a passive or aggressive defiance to participate. It's now they understand that it's a safe space, and so they're more willing to participate. It's cross-cultural community building in classrooms and on the playground. We're seeing, where students kind of don't really used to not play with other ethnicities, honestly, to be frank. We're seeing more cross-cultural participation with kids, which is just awesome, and then that's carrying over into our parent community as well, which is just a massive, massive progress. I can't even begin to tell you, and that still is the challenge, obviously. But it also has improved our school site climate, and our staff members are just like way more at peace at being in school, and our school site climate survey is a reflection of that. Just real quickly, if you were to look at, I'm going to skip the numbers, it's okay. It has improved, the school site climate has improved. Challenges still are like, we have doubt, there's still staff doubt and resistance, which is fine, that's always going to be the case whenever you have a new program. Use of restorative language is important, and then families questioning severity of consequences and seeing like, hey, is that, you just had a meeting and then the kid didn't get suspended, that's a challenge. And then the biggest one is time and resources, and I think all of us in public education, or in education in general, can realize that that's always a challenge. But as a school, we're making progress. Our next steps, we actually just finished a 5-day training to plan for the first day of our PED. Our next steps are developing a strong staff community, so starting with the staff and making that a strong foundation. Continued support with our peers in restorative practices. Looking at restorative conferences at our school, and then most importantly, trying to come up with a really appropriate consequences that match the harm done, repair the community, and also kind of help to change the behavior the next time versus just suspending a kid. So that's kind of where we are at Visitation Valley. Thank you.
Started with some of the early work I had done in getting my principal to come on board and embrace the idea that we should just start building community amongst the staff. Something that a lot of staffs don't do, but that's so essential because it's all about relationships. And it's the adult relationships that have to model also for the young people. And so we started with just asking them about who they were. Starting keeping a journal during staff meetings and spending part of the time journaling just about our own experiences, and then leading icebreakers and community builders during that time. So one of the things that our school district did here were they created these posters and cards that you saw on the way in, but these are super helpful because this is something you can put inside a teacher's hand or a parent's hand or a principal's hand, and they can carry our youth's hand. As it were. And that's exactly what we did at Ready. So they have a list of circle ideas, prompts that can be used, and the base restorative questions. So for us, we started doing that amongst our staff just to get the staff used to it. So every meeting, we sort of make sure we sit in a circle as a staff. And these are like real basic sort of signals that help develop that culture. So getting everyone, including the after school program staff, to start doing circles every day. Something real basic. A lot of good teachers already do it, and then helping them recognize what in their practice is already restorative, right? So you end up getting less resistance from teachers when you identify, and parents, when you identify what they already do that's restorative, and use that as the starting point, and then just begin to add to that. And that's really it really makes the big difference, because if everyone feels like they're in it together and not, it's just coming from one person. So you can't do the work alone. It can't just be one single champion at a school who's responsible. You have to find allies. I lucked out at our school because my principal really bought in early on, and then went to trainings herself, and we believe in it. And so because we believe in it, we could actually live it. So then it began to affect when there were conflicts amongst adults or with parents, she could begin to actually use some of the language that she was learning, and then parents would hear it, they would be treated well, and then it would become contagious in a way, right? So then other people start using the language. So then what we did was we got an awesome staff person who's our elementary advisor, who's a gift from the district, actually out of our school budget. But he came and he created these things called conflict managers, where we basically worked the kids, red t-shirts, gave them clipboards, trained them in restorative questions, and then set them loose on the yard during their recess period. So it really begins. So then they lead it, and it's really young people also leading the way and modeling as they would come up and they say, you know, I asked them these questions, we were able to resolve it, and it really expands things. And then we did trainings with our parents and our PTAs, and at the PTC meeting, just starting with an intro, like this is what's developing appropriately for your children, and this is how you can approach those, and then let people ask questions, and really letting parents give scenarios and teachers give scenarios about, well, what do you do in this situation? What do you do in this situation? And really it's really relational. So there's not just a list of, we're moving away from the list of consequences. We're actually having kids generate, this is what I need. So one of the things I do with my students in first grade is I teach them and I say, when something occurs, the first thing you do is you ask the person, are you okay? And then if they say no, then you ask them, what do you need? And then based on their responses, that's how you address the concern. And sometimes kids need revenge. And so you help them talk good. And because the reality is, for there to be any kind of justice, everyone has to be heard. And everyone has to have a say in there and what happens to them. Right? It's that social discipline window of 2 and 4. It's really like, even someone who has done something wrong, it's really engaging them. It's really about a full engagement process of their whole person. So,
Chandler, and I work at El Dorado Elementary School, which is also located in Visitation Valley. And I have had the pleasure of being there for the last 4 years of the whole implementation process of restorative practices. And truly what started the implementation process was 4 years ago, the school social worker expressed an interest in restorative practices, and at PD at the beginning of the school year, she gave us a crash course in restorative practices and kind of said there will be more to come, and I am absolutely not giving it justice right now. And then shortly after that, we had Carrie come out and she did a whole school training of restorative practices, and the movement continued. And a couple years later, we had Helen come out and she gave another whole school training to our staff. And this is the first year that we've had site leaders, and also the first year that we have been able to have a parent training and to really increase our engagement in terms of parent and community involvement. One huge accomplishment that we have had this year is we have a wellness center at El Dorado, and the wellness center is based entirely on restorative practices and trauma-informed practices. And this is a space where students are able to come and calm down, to regulate their emotions. They're able to come and talk it out, is what we call restorative practices at El Dorado. So there are different sections of the wellness center. Students are able to come and utilize those sections based in those practices. And to give you some specific numbers, this year, thus far, we have 637 documented visits to the wellness center. About 220 of those visits have been to talk it out, to have restorative conversations, and the rest have been, about 400 and some have been to calm it down. So we have students who are absolutely responding to these practices, and the Wellness Center is by far one of the biggest accomplishments. So in terms of what restorative practice looks like at El Dorado, it is students actively using the language, saying, I want to talk it out. I want to talk about what happened. I feel that I was harmed. I feel that I want to express. I often say that El Dorado is a feeling school. We talk about feelings all the time, and I know some people have strong feelings about talking about feelings, but it has absolutely been essential to, and is such a big component of restorative practices, because when you are able to express how you feel like a human being, you feel heard, you feel seen. And so in terms of the impact that we have seen at El Dorado, for one, our staff morale has increased entirely. Last year, at the end of last year, we had 10 staff leaving due to burnout and other various things. This year, we only have 2 staff who are not returning, which, yes, is absolutely something to clap about and cannot be disconnected from our work with restorative practices, because we have worked so hard to build a community where all members feel valued and heard. And there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, than that. So staff morale has increased, a general sense of community and belonging amongst students and staff, that people are just generally happier, healthier, in my opinion. They are able to have these connections with each other. I see students being empathetic and compassionate on a daily basis to themselves and others. They are able to recognize what they're feeling, to communicate what they're feeling, and appropriately use restorative practices to have their needs met. So in terms of the impact at our school, those are some things that could absolutely be measured. In terms of challenges, we have had so many that I could take a lifetime telling you how many challenges we've had, because it is a huge shift to get anyone, including myself, to think this way. It is definitely a fundamental, radical shift that takes a lot of time. We have had so many challenges. One of the biggest misconceptions about restorative practices is that it doesn't hold people accountable. And I'm here to tell you right now that is not true. It absolutely holds everyone accountable. It increases self-awareness, reflection, compassion, empathy. It is incredible. It holds people accountable in ways that, honestly, I wish that restorative practices had entered my life sooner. And the last thing in terms of next steps, absolutely next steps are continuing to increase parent and community involvement. because that is an area that we have struggled in. We are right now very successful, in my opinion, at El Dorado in terms of restorative practices and implementing them. But in terms of next steps, we need to continue to work with parent and community members to really continue that shift forward in terms of restorative practices.
Let's get to the challenge, because it's a work in progress. We're far from perfect. It is a work in progress. We're not there yet. The biggest challenge is that you do have some students that you have frequent small impromptu conferences with. You do have students that you have restorative circles, and you bring that circle just keeps getting wider and wider, and the behaviors aren't changing. But what I found is that in most cases, those students are being impacted by trauma. And they're coming from a place where they feel harmed. And they are being harmed. They are facing terrible circumstances, usually caused by neglect or poverty or self-concept images of feeling, I'm stupid, you know, I'm crazy. I mean, the things kids open up and tell you, you all know as educators. So that is really the challenge as we move forward, is how do we address that? So we just don't start looking at, okay, we need to go punitive with this student because this student is a repeat offender, but we have to better address that trauma piece. And boy, that 5 minutes went by fast.